Hello and welcome to another edition of You Can't Beat the Drums. I'm in my little drum studio today and somebody asked me to do a tour of my Sonor kit, and most of this is Sonor but not all of it, and I'll explain why in a couple of minutes. I started with this snare drum. This was an old snare drum that was given to me by my music director at my community college I attended in the 70s, and I'll talk more about that drum in a few minutes. But this snare drum is probably the only original piece of this set other than this ride cymbal. This is a Zildjian Avitas ride, and my dad got that for me as a present when I was 14 years old. And I'll be recording this set at the end of this video through my mixer, so the sound hopefully will be better than this lapel mic, but it's a great sounding ride. I just love the way it sounds, and it is very old, like me. Anyway, so what I did was I bought some of these drums from a guy in New York, a drummer who had to sell them for some reason. He was a guy who loved his drums. He took great care of them. And I got the bass drum, 22-inch bass drum, the tom mounting hardware, a 12, a 13, a 14-inch floor tom right there, and I believe a 13 and a 15 as well, although I might have added those later. I actually can't remember, it was so long ago. It was probably 25, 26 years ago. But I got the main body of the drums, all the shells, for about $1,600, which I think is a pretty good deal for these things, even back then. I did add a couple of drums later. One of them is this floor tom, this 16-inch floor tom. It looks pretty much exactly like the other drums as far as style and the copper hardware and so forth. But that's deceiving because this was actually a Sonor Hilit, not a Hilit exclusive. Now the wood was the same, but the hardware was all chrome. So what do you do if you have chrome hardware and you want it to match? You take it completely apart, you give the parts to art brass, and you have them copper plate them. So you can see that it looks almost exactly the same. You really can't tell from a distance at all or even up close, other than on the real Hilit exclusives. This tube is actually a tube all the way around. It's a solid, tube, hollow probably, but it's a tube. On the not really a Hilit exclusive, on just the Hilit, you can't really tell, but back here, there's actually a groove. It's not a tube. You can kind of see that space, so it's like a U shape almost, but when it's copper plated looking from this direction, you can't tell the difference. The real telltale sign is the badge, because it had a Hilit badge on it. So I got a hold of a Hilit exclusive badge and simply glued it on top of the original badge. Okay, this was years ago and I didn't have as much money as I do now, so I sort of cheaped out. But at any rate, that floor tom really looks great, it sounds great, and it matches. So that's the important thing. Now, what I also did, because I wanted things to match, was I took this cloud badge Slingerland. It's probably from the 40s. There's the actual original badge there. It was brown wood grain, kind of an ugly color when I first got it, and it had different lugs, and different rims too, for that matter. It was the old style of Slingerland lugs and so on. Well, the Slingerland lugs that were on it were so crummy that they crumbled into dust when I held on to them. So I replaced those with the 60s style Slingerland lugs. Again, this was a long time ago. It was probably in the early 80s, late 70s. And the more modern stick saver rims, I think they're called, took all that stuff to art brass. They copper plated everything, and then I had it painted black for a while, and that was how it looked for years. But when I had the copper plating done, I also had them take it down to bare wood, and I asked them to match the wood color as closely as possible to the Sonors. And you can kind of tell that they did an excellent job. It was a furniture shop in Tacoma, and it looks very close. The drum is beautiful and sounds really good, in my opinion. Then, of course, I copper plated my rototoms and the bar that they attach to. You can see that's copper plated as well. Had all that copper plated so it matched. And then I bought these piece drums from what used to be Don Bennett Drum Studios in Bellevue. Now I think it's called Rudy's Drum Shop. I bought them. They were black, and they cost $98. So I got those all taken apart and copper plated too, and they turned out beautifully. Now, copper plating is not cheap, unfortunately. It's probably way more expensive now than it was back when I had this done years ago. But at any rate, it looks kind of cool having it all copper plated. Now the stands are not copper plated. The stands are primarily Tama, and you can see some of them are pretty old Tama stands, but they're in good shape. They work great. And I actually like the chrome a little bit better because the copper stands that I could have gotten if I wanted to spend the money for these Sonars, that copper scratches and starts oxidizing pretty quickly. And unless I wanted to wrap every single stand individually, it would have been a matter of time before they would have looked kind of scratchy and crummy. So I kept all the stands chrome, and it suits me. They work great, and probably easier to expand if I ever want to buy any more drums like this and put them on floor stands. Not that I need any more drums. As you can see, I think I have enough. Got a couple conga drums back there too, which I don't use very often. I got a pretty good deal on those years ago, and they're there just in case somebody needs a conga player. This little stand is a cheapie. You can see it's a little inexpensive stand, but it's only holding up my auxiliary percussion, the little triangles I've got here, and then of course, that didn't sound very good. Oh, it's sort of sort of hung up on the CD cases over there. Anyway, I took this piece of wood when I was a kid, drilled a bunch of holes in it, took a hacksaw and hacksawed all of these little aluminum rod pieces. I cut a bunch of long pieces into short pieces, and now, yes, I made inexpensive wind chimes, complete with little pieces of, I don't know what that is, piano wire or something. Made that back in like 1975 or something when I was in high school. So it's been around a long time, and it kind of does the job. And then I've got the requisite tambourine just in case I need it. Now, the hi-hat is something that has garnered a lot of interest. It's a different hi-hat stand than most have seen, and it's got a story as well. You see, it's made by Mapex, and it's called the Janus system. And let me just take this off of there. The Janus system was a neat system to have a double bass drum approach, but only using one pedal. Since you can't have your left foot on two pedals at once very effectively, what they did was they designed this arrangement where you put your foot in the pedal and you move it to the left, and it operates the hi-hat cymbals. Okay, move it to the right, and then it works the double bass. Now, I didn't like the bass drum pedal as much as the DW9000, and so when I got the DW9000, which is a pretty good bass drum pedal, I simply used the Janus pedal on the left with the hi-hat assembly with the DW9000 pedal. So I've got kind of the best of both worlds. The other thing I didn't like about the Janus was that it was a single brace, and all my other stands are double braced, and I wanted it to match. So I took the Janus apart, and I took part of a Tama cymbal stand and I put double braced legs on. So not only is this a rare Mapex pedal, which again switches over from bass drum to hi-hat, but it's the only one in the world probably that has double braced. So that's kind of an interesting story on that. Cymbal wise, I have a really inexpensive, I think it's a Wuhan or something, 14-inch China type, which really doesn't sound that great, but since I have it, I use it. I have a little tiny 8-inch Zildjian Splash, a Vita Zildjian, and an old 10-inch Vita Splash. That's kind of a cool old splash. It's very thin. And on this drum set, I use these little quick release Vader, I think they are, cymbal release things, kind of nice for setting up and tearing down quickly. The other thing I've been using now on my other sets, and this as well, are these little rubber grommets. You get those and you put them on the cymbals. They don't really affect the sound at all, but they make setup and tear down quickly. In fact, I don't even need these Vader tops really, because those little rubber things kind of keep the cymbals right where they need to be. Anyway, that's an old 10-inch, very thin splash. Then I've got a 16-inch Zildjian medium crash. This is an interesting story. That's a 16-inch, and it is incredibly heavy. It's like a ride cymbal. And when I was touring with this gospel band back in the 80s, we were playing at this location for a week. And during one of the evening performances, a guy and his wife walked up to me, and the guy started talking to me, and he said, "Yeah, I'm a drummer, and I think I have an old cymbal left at my house, and I think it's a Zildjian." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, do you want to sell it?" Because I figured maybe I'd get a good price on it. And he said, "Well, let me think about it. I'll bring it tomorrow night and you can look at it." So he brought it in, and I think it's half of a pair of orchestral crash cymbals, where you hold one in each hand and bang them together because it's so thick. Or it might be even a bottom 16-inch hi-hat cymbal. I don't know. It didn't say anything on it other than Evita Zildjian, and it sounds kind of cool as a little jazz ride. So I said, what do you want for it? And the wife said, oh, honey, just give it to him. And the guy said, well, I don't know. And inside I was thinking, yes, yes. But on the outside I was saying, oh, no, I couldn't accept it for free. I'll pay you something for it. And the guy finally said, no, you could just have it. I want you to have it. So I got it for free. Pretty cool. That was in 1980. So that's 40 years ago. And it still sounds pretty cool. Then we have another 16-inch thin crash. We have that 20-inch ride I talked about. I have another medium crash, 16-inch, and a 17-inch medium thin crash, all Evita Zildjians. And then this is a very interesting story too. That is a 17-inch China type. And what's funny about that is back about 1983 or so, I happened to be in a pawn shop in, I think it was Shelton, Washington. And there were two of these things. They were 18-inch, and they wanted $70 for both of them. So I bought them, and I sold one of them to a friend of mine for $70. So I got this one for free. Now, I mentioned it was 18-inch when I bought it. Well, there was a little tiny crack starting on one edge of it. So I lathed it down to 17-inch, and it's been a 17-inch China type from then on. My hi-hat cymbals on this set are 15-inch A. Zildjian Rock hi-hats. So I got those again years ago, some great deal or something, and I've been using them ever since. And they're a little larger than the standard 14s, but they work fine and sound pretty good. I have the requisite cowbell. We need more cowbell. And the woodblock. What's interesting about those is that both of those were found in a Christmas stocking. The woodblock when I was about 9 years old, and the cowbell, I don't remember when that was, but they are gifts and they have been with me for decades. So what does this all sound like? Well, I'm going to stop the video here and I'm going to try running the drum set through these mics I have set up. These again are old mics, but they seem to do the job. And I have the drum all mic'd up, and I have this little Behringer mixer. And what I'm going to attempt to do is use the iRig Stream. And what it allows you to do is to take the output from a mixer, run it into this little box, and then there's a special cable that comes with it that plugs in there. You see that? And that goes to your phone. It's got a level control, which is handy. It's got a couple of options here for loop back and whether you want it to be mono or stereo. Has a little DC in if you don't want to use batteries. And on the other side, you've got an adjustment for headphones if you want to wear phones while you're doing it, as well as a mic volume. So I'm going to try this little box. I haven't tried it yet with this setup, so let's see what it sounds like. This first little demo is going to be muffled with my little muffling rings, which so many people hate. And then I'll follow that by another example of how the drums sound without the muffling rings. In other words, open. So hope you enjoy it. Now here's what those same drums sound like unmuffled. This is without those tone rings.